All the way from London, we have Tim Weber. Tim joined Framestore, one of the first 10 or 12 people to join Framestore. Tim Weber.
Good morning, and welcome to my talk about Gravity. I was the visual effects supervisor for Gravity. I'm going to talk a little bit about how we made it, the various things we did in the making of it, and then a little bit afterwards about how that's influenced a variety of other things we do at Framestore afterwards. I was going to call the talk To Gravity and Beyond, but my pop-out wings were left behind. So, but basically, one of the things about Gravity is it's a very different movie to any movie I think that anyone has ever made before. We ended up having to turn the whole movie-making process on its head, and in sort of relating it to the theme of this get-together, capture, compute, create. What we in fact did was nothing. Oh, here we go. Was create, compute, capture. As I said, we kind of reversed everything around, which I'll explain in more detail later. But before I do that, for some of you who won't have seen the movie, and for those of you who saw it a while ago as a reminder, let me just play the trailer.
Explorer's been hit. Explorer, do you read? Explorer, over, Explorer. Astronaut is off structure. Dr. Stone is off structure.
What do I do?
Dr. Stone intact.
No.
You must detach. Don't detach that arm's going to carry you too far. Listen to my voice. You need to focus. I'm moving visual of you. In a few seconds I won't be able to track you. You need to detach. I can't see you anymore. Do it now. Houston, I've lost visual of Dr. Stone. Houston, I've lost visual of Dr. Stone. Do you copy?
Yes, I copy. I'm detached.
Position.
I don't know. I'm spinning. I can't.
Report your position.
GPS is down. It's down. I can't.
Give me a visual.
I told you nothing. I see nothing.
You have a visual of Explorer.
No.
You have a visual of ISS.
No.
You need to focus anything. It's the sun and the earth. Give me coordinates.
I can't breathe.
Give me
I can't breathe.
coordinates. Dr. Stone. You're burning oxygen. You have to sip, not gulp.
So where's home, Dr. Stone?
Like Zurich, Illinois.
Was there somebody down there looking up, thinking about you?
I had a daughter. A little girl with brown hair. Tell her that I'm not quitting.
How Gravity started, when I first sort of came across Gravity when Alfonso Cuarón, the director, came in to see me and wanted to talk through the movie with me. He hadn't written the script at the time, but we sat on a couple of sofas and he explained the story over 40 minutes. And actually, even at that point, I came out of those 40 minutes pretty breathless. But people often ask me if at that stage we knew just how complicated and how much of a challenge it was going to be. And the answer is no, because we had no idea how we were going to make the film. In fact, we had no idea if we could make the film at that stage, but somehow you have to just get a feeling that it's something that's worth having a go at and you know, jumping into. And one thing I can say for sure is that I certainly realized more how big a challenge it was going to be than Alfonso, who thought it was a very simple movie he could complete in a few months. It took us a solid 3 years and a little bit beyond that, really. So why was it such a complicated movie? I mean, there's obviously thousands of challenges in it, but to talk about the three of the key challenges. The first one was fairly obvious. Location. It's set in space. You can't travel to space to shoot very easily, and you can't really build it on the back lot. So we had to create that in the computer. There was an awful lot of it, because it's pretty much the whole movie, but that was a very known challenge. That wasn't sort of anything to take us by surprise. The next one was also fairly obvious. We would have to simulate zero gravity, but it did come as a surprise just how difficult that was. It wasn't until we were months into the process, really, that we sort of really realized just how gravity rules every little thing you do in everyday life. And that makes simulating it incredibly hard. And that's the reason most movies have 30 seconds of people floating around and then flick on the gravity simulation switch. But that's all right for sci-fi, but we were a contemporary film set in NASA space. And the third was Alfonso Cuarón's penchant for the extremely long shot. I'd worked with him before on Children of Men, which had a number of multi-minute shots in it and was pretty complicated, but we didn't realize just how much further he wanted to push that on this film. The shot is 12 minutes, and that is really just the beginning of it. And making long shots like that it is a massive challenge in its own right. To choreograph and plan and shoot and make a shot hold together that's that long is a big challenge. But what we found was it didn't just add to the challenge of the other challenges, it actually multiplied the other challenges as well. For instance, creating space became that much harder when the camera is lingering on some CG object for many minutes on end, and the audience has a chance to examine it in great detail. And when you're orbiting the Earth, you can't just put up a still image of the Earth over minutes, because you're actually, you're moving around it, and the sun is setting and the light is changing. So we had to create an Earth that was modeled on the heights of mountains and the depths of oceans, and had clouds structured, and all the light scattering in the atmosphere was simulated. And with the zero gravity, there's lots of tricks you can do for a close-up shot and different tricks you can do for a wide shot. But in a movie with shots as long as this, what starts as a big wide shot then goes into a two-shot with a long series of minutes of dialogue, and then into a close-up, and then into an action scene. So we had to find solutions that would work across all these things. So Alfonso's initial plan was to suspend actors on wires in front of a green screen, or largely in front of set pieces for part of the Hubble or the space shuttle or whatever, and film it like that, and for us just to fill in the outside. But because of the strain of gravity when you're filming in gravity, on Earth, that was obvious to me that wasn't going to work, because there's no way we could have actors up for that length of time and in any way sell that they were in zero gravity. You'd see the strain in every second. So I persuaded Alfonso eventually that we needed to create most of the movie in CG. He was understandably very reluctant, because no one had done that before. The only sort of movie that had been that much created in CG, I suppose, was Avatar, and that was a fantasy movie, really, compared to ours, and also had a budget many times greater than ours. So Alfonso, took a bit of persuading, but eventually we did manage to persuade him that it was the only way to make his movie. That comes with its own challenges. As I discussed, making the CG photo real, but I'm not going to go into that too much today. The other challenge that came with it, though, was we were making most of it CG, but not the faces. Faces are incredibly hard to sell if you're doing them in the computer. So we were going to film the faces, but then you have to find a way of filming those faces as if the actor is acting within an environment that doesn't exist. All that stuff you saw in the trailer going on around them, they have to be looking at it, they have to respond to it, they have to, act as if that's happening there with all the light bouncing off the objects floating around them as they're spinning around on their faces. So we had to create a way of filming the actors as if this was all going on around them when it wasn't. So let's have a look at the process. And as I said, we had to flip filmmaking on its head to do so. The first part in our reversed create, compute, capture is the create stage, which obviously starts with writing and designing. And on any big movie these days, there's some previs. Where we differed is we had to previs every single second of the film. And we had to do it to a level of detail that no one's ever really done before, because we needed the previs to create that environment for the actors to perform in. So we ended up creating essentially an animated movie that was a complete movie with Sandra and George doing the voiceover and every bit of the movie animated as if to final animation level. Here you can see a little bit of previs, not one of the most complicated bits, but sort of we had to do the whole movie like this. And not just animate the movement to incredible level of detail, we also had to design the lighting to an incredible level of detail so we could light their faces as if this was happening. So as you can see here where she's spinning around, the light is essentially doing all sorts of complicated things, and actually in this scene the sun sets as well. And one of the benefits, actually, before I get on to compute, one of the benefits of doing this is we did have a whole movie designed that we could watch on the screen, and we learned a lot from the previs that went back into the writing and design process. And all these processes worked together, and it interlocked with each other, and it was a really beneficial way of making a movie. We then move on to the compute stage. The initial part of the compute stage really happened in my head, and I spent many hours sitting there staring at the previs and the pre-light, working out how to divide the shots up into sort of manageable chunks, and how we were going to invisibly join those chunks together, and roughly what equipment we would use to shoot each individual bit, because we came up with a number of different solutions. And once we knew roughly which bit of equipment we'd use, we then had to restage the motion. In order to mask the effect of gravity on the actor, we wanted the actors to be largely upright and very comfortable. Otherwise, you see the strain of gravity. So we had to remove the motion of the actor, whether it's the spinning you saw there or whatever other motion, and put that motion onto the camera so that the camera, for instance, in that spinning one, will be orbiting around Sandra. And we'd also have to put motion onto the light so that that was all orbiting around Sandra, which was a very complicated process. And we used technical previs, or techvis as we called it, where we worked out ways of all these different objects moving around, and we basically worked out how we would take that information from the previs to run everything on the set. And you can see here a little bit of some of the tools that we used to do that. Let me just move on so that you can see them for real. So in order to get this motion, we had to come up with a number of innovative ways that had never really been used before of staging the action. One of them was to put the camera on a robot, which we actually got in contact with a company from San Francisco, now called Bot and Dolly, who had been putting cameras on robots, on car assembly robots. And it gave us the chance to move the camera in ways that would otherwise be unachievable. But we worked with them to push their technology further. We put the camera on a track. We added a traditional camera head onto the end of it for some shots. And we developed new control mechanisms so that we could control it in specific ways to adapt to the actors' performances. And we also used these robots to move the lights around, as you can see here. So we actually had 3 of these robots working in synchronization, all being run essentially off the previs we'd previously created. But as you can tell from this, moving lights of this size around is quite a cumbersome thing to do. We'd originally intended to do half the shots using lights on robots, but it was very cumbersome. And what we ended up using was the Lightbox. You can see in the back of this shot, this tool called the Lightbox, which was much easier to use, which was another innovation we designed for the movie. You can see here that this doesn't really look much like space at all, and in fact doesn't really look much like a traditional film set. But this is where we were shooting, if I can get this to move on. So the Lightbox was a sort of 9 foot by 9 foot cube, although we could change its size and dimensions to suit different shots. It had around about 1.7 million individual LEDs on the inside, and it's essentially like a cube of a massive, very bright television screen on the inside of a cube. We rendered the world around the actor as if seen from their perspective, and we played that back on the screen so that they could see what was going on around them. They had a rough impression of what was going on around them, but also, and critically, so that the world around them lit them, so that the lighting could move and change color, and a bit of white light could come up as another astronaut flew past or whatever. Another technique we used was a 12-wire rig. I'll just skip over this quickly, but essentially it's a way of, we pushed the development of wire rigs a little bit further. It was a way of puppeteering Sandra Bullock. We triangulated 4 points on her, and you could stand at the side of the stage with a control and do this with it, and Sandra over the other end of the stage would be doing that. You can see a little bit of it here, which was also quite useful. So that was really that's the capture part of the process. So in a way, we created the movie first, we computed how we were going to capture it, and then we capture it. And then we go back to a more traditional sort of filmmaking, capture, compute, create process. But we had to reanimate the film. We took the previs, but we had to completely reanimate the film to work with the performance of the actors. We used their performances as a guide, but obviously they were performing with the wrong tools in gravity. So we weren't copying their performances exactly, we were just using the intention of their performance and making everything go on around them, and simulating all the motion of the spacesuit, the cloth, and the tethers, and the parachute in the background, and the destruction that happens. And then, skipping very quickly through the processes here, but then we would light and render, and as you can see, there had to be a lot of detail went into all the elements that we were rendering. And one of the big decisions I made very early on was to use ray tracing-based, physically correct rendering, which was quite a new thing, really. But I think it made a massive difference to the film in the way it looked, and it did make a massive difference into the render times as well. In fact, one of our render wranglers at one point decided to work out when we would have had to have at what point we'd have had to have started the render if we wanted to render the whole movie on a single processor. And he discovered that we would have had to kick off the render in around about 5000 BC. And then we do the compositing and the finishing. We take the faces that we'd filmed and we integrate them into the CG. And this is, we do all sorts of other finishing. For instance, we have to put on the CG visor over the top of the faces. Even that was computer generated. And to make that look believable, we had to have scratches and fingerprints all over it. And we had to put every single breath the actor was taking, frosting and defrosting the visor as they were breathing, as they were talking, and as they were turning their head. That's the sort of level of detail you have to go to make it all believable. There was one little bit of capture, compute, create that went slightly wrong. Well, there was a lot, I suppose, that went slightly wrong. But there's one particular one where we thought we'd do something a little bit different with the crew photo. We took a picture of the crew, and we emailed it up to an astronaut who was on the ISS, who Sandra had been talking to. And they were going to print it out and take a picture of our crew photograph and send it back down to us. So we did this, we sent it up. Unfortunately, just then their printer ran out of ink. And Amazon deliveries don't really reach that far. So they had to wait a number of months for the next Soyuz to arrive. But eventually, we did actually get, here you can see our crew photograph, photographed in the window of the ISS in space, and there are the astronauts holding it, which actually makes me feel very satisfied to see that. It was through Making Gravity that I sort of realized how what's going on these days is very much a merging of the real world and the virtual world. That the traditional boundaries of the virtual world being on the screen are no longer there, really, and you can see plenty of that going on around you here. This is something we did a number of years ago in the old way. I just thought this was quite relevant because it sort of reminds me how I felt when we were trying to get the robots to do what we wanted them to. But it seems to be definitely, a big movement that's been going on in the last few years. And we've found that, the work we did on Gravity has really sort of benefited us in many of the other areas that we're doing in that sort of zone. You can see a few of them here. And it has been of great benefit. For instance, we did actually work out methods of capturing facial performances so that we could render realistic faces. We ended up not using these very much because the Lightbox was so successful. So these weren't ever finished. This is sort of our R&D work in progress. But the benefits that we've got off that have gone into many of the processes we do. And in fact, we've built quite a sort of wide-ranging capture lab to do all sorts of different captures and techniques. We've just bought another 130 stills cameras on top of the ones you see here for our stills capture, and we did a 17 camera array with 17 reds recently for a film. And we do motion capture, and every different type of capture goes on these days. And I'm going to skip over the real-time bit, actually, because we haven't got time. But it's benefited some of our real-time tools.
Audiences are amazed by a virtual first look at Christopher.
The sound a second. And also, particularly virtual reality and augmented reality. We've just opened a VR studio a few months ago. But Gravity is a very immersive film. It's very much an experience itself. And we learned a lot about how to tell immersive stories from Gravity. So it was very useful in that way. But it was also very useful. We recently did a job for Fiat, which there was no way we could have done the pre-rendering required for the virtual reality without the render farm that we'd built on Gravity. Some of the things we learned, the virtual is leaving the screen. As I just mentioned, everything is merging. The benefits of sharing ideas across disciplines. Gravity was a show where the different departments were forced to work incredibly closely together, the different traditional filmmaking departments, because it was a whole new way of making a film. Nothing about it had been done before, so we had to work together. And that was massively beneficial in the film, and so now we're really trying to share what we've learned from Gravity with the other departments within Framestore, and it's sort of one of the reasons I'm here today is to see what goes on in various other disciplines. A big thing that was important on Gravity, and I think is very important in our industry anyway, is letting the concept lead, not getting too carried away with the technology. Let the technology service the concept in the first place. And risk is the mother of innovation. Without having taken the risk of not knowing what on earth we were going to do, we wouldn't have come up with many of the solutions that we came up with. And I'm very glad we did that. Although it was quite hair-raising, I honestly don't believe that. We spent 3 months solid on it. I think it was around about 3 years solid on it. I think it was around about 2 months before the end of delivering the whole movie that I really felt that we could achieve it. So it was quite a scary ride just making it. And actually, at the end of the movie, you're never finished is the other thing. I will finish shortly, though. Is that we were delivering the final shot that we were delivering, showing it to Alfonso. It was actually the opening shot that we'd pretty much been working on since the beginning of the movie. And we showed it to him, and it was looking fantastic, and he thought it was great. But we were just discussing how it was a movie you could watch anyway, because there was no up, there was no down. So we played it back to him upside down, because it looked quite cool upside down. At which point, he said, I want it upside down. So we thought we'd finish the movie, and we had to spend another 3 months re-rendering it so that it worked upside down and could be done the other way up. So that's the story of making Gravity. All right, thank you very much.
Thank you, Tim. Fantastic. Thank you, Tim. Fantastic.